Welcome to Whiskey's a Journey. My name is Peter Fossano, and today is Monday. I have a double whiskey review coming at you, just like I did last week with the Green River Bourbons. Up next is the Ben Holladay Bourbons. Both expressions are bottled in bond, coming in at 100 proof. We've got a higher rye bourbon, along with their soft red wheat bourbon. They're both coming in at 6 years of age. The mash bill is the same with the exception of the rye percentage as opposed to the wheat percentage. They are 73% corn, 15% rye, 15% wheat, and both 12% malted barley. The higher rye bourbon was distilled in the spring of 2017 and bottled March 13th, 2024. And then the soft red wheat looks like it was bottled or distilled in the fall of 2017 and bottled in 2024. So let's go ahead and pour them, nose them, taste them, talk about Ben Holladay Distillery a little bit, add some water to them, and then if you stick around until the end, I will give each of these their own individual score. I also need to let you know that I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. These are 750 milliliter bottles, and I paid $74.99 for the bourbon, and then I always forget, the soft red wheat. Soft red wheat was $55.99. All right, let's go ahead and start with the higher rye bourbon. Get this thing on the nose, taste it, and then move on to the soft red wheat. Okay, so the bourbon, or the higher rye bourbon, has a cherry note, and then right behind that cherry note there is that's not a prune, a plum. It's got like a red plum note to it as well. So it's a cherry plum spice, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, pepper. The spice is a little bit lower and it comes across as more fruity than spice. Like all bourbons, I do get the vanilla, the 6 years of age. I wouldn't say that this is very over oaked or if there's really much oak to it at all, but it smells like a woody bourbon. Tell you what, it smells really good. Let's go ahead and get it on the palate. Spice up front, there's a little bit of an oak. Mid palate, that cherry and plum note comes in. Good amount of proof. I kind of feel it in my chest. It's kind of sinking into the back of my throat and a little bit down into the chest. Good proof. Not a whole lot of spice, but there is a little bit of a spice there. I would say that this is pretty well rounded. There's a good amount of sweetness along with the spice, but not too much spice. Finish is hanging around just a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's a very long finish, probably around the medium area. Before I move on to the wheated bourbon, I'm going to get a little bit of a rinse. I'm going to take one more sip of this one, let that air out a little bit as I coated the glass, and then we'll move on. Yeah, as it's sitting here a little bit longer, there's a little bit more of a tannin forming on the side of the tongue. So maybe the finish is moving into the longish kind of realm. So yeah, medium to long. Let's get one more sip and then move on to the wheated bourbon. Smells really good. Second sip, a little bit more oak now is coming through. The tannin levels are rising. The spice notes are also elevated. The fruity note is now taking more of a back seat to the spice. I would say the intensity of the sweet and spice flipped on that second sip, but they're still within the parameters that I like. One is not really overpowering the other, even though they did flip-flop the spots. Let's go ahead and add some water to this one. Let it sit here for a little bit, and then get on to the wheated bourbon, I should say. It has a little bit of a tobacco note. It's not as spicy on the nose, so it's a little bit softer on the nose. Not getting much of a cherry note, but there is a fruit coming through here. I'd say more along the lines of an apple or a pear as opposed to a plum and a cherry. And I think wheated bourbons aren't as vibrant on a nose as a high rye bourbon would be. Everything comes across as subdued. Still smells really good. Let's go ahead and get it on the palate. Yeah, it's soft. It's fruity. Apple and pear are coming through. Not a whole lot of tannin. Like I said, it's just it's soft. It's pillowy. I don't get wheated vibes from this like I would normally get a wheated roll or a bready kind of note. I don't think that's coming through. It doesn't develop into much of anything. It's very nondescript. This comes across as a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more depth, a little bit more character to it. Kind of has a little bit of a zing with that sweet and spice. This one, the soft red wheat, it's just overall, I don't want to say basic in a bad way, but it's just nondescript. It's good. All the notes that are coming out of the glass, nose and palate, are very palatable. I like it. I enjoy it. It's just nothing remarkable. It's a little bit forgettable. Let's go ahead and get one more sip in. I add a little bit more to this so I can get some water into it. And then we'll go on to talking a little bit about Ben Holladay Distillery. Now, the one descriptor that I could use on here is soft. It is soft. It's a little bit sweet. Doesn't have nearly as much spice as the first one. Doesn't really have much of a development of flavors. It hits the front of the palate pretty sweet. Stays consistent all the way back to the back of the palate. A little bit of tannin on the side, slight amount of spice, very soft, and then the flavors just fall off. This would be a short finish compared to glass number one, their regular bourbon. So let's go ahead and let these things sit for a little bit and then get into the history of the Ben Holladay Distillery, which I don't think was ever really named Ben Holladay Distillery until recently. So the distillery in Missouri was actually founded in 1856 by Ben Holladay under the name Blue Springs Distillery. They went into production, they laid their barrels down for I think a couple of years, maybe a year or two, and they were storing their barrels in a cave on the property, which apparently now with the tours that they have open is actually one of the highlights of the distillery tour. Shortly after the release of their first whiskey, Ben Holladay eventually transferred the ownership of the distillery onto his brother, which was Major David Holladay. From there, David Holladay passed the distillery or transferred the ownership to the distillery onto his son and his brother-in-law. Scratch that, not his brother-in-law, his son-in-law. Major David Holladay ended up passing away in 1893, and then in 1894, his son and son-in-law changed the name to Barton and Holladay Distillery. It stayed in the family name all the way through, I think, the late 1800s, and then it changed hands a couple of times, probably 3 or 4 times until 1993, when the current named distillery, McCormick Distilling Company, was acquired by a private investment group. And I do believe, I think I read this on their website, that prior to 1993, prior to the sale, MGP, Midwestern Grain Products, actually purchased the distillery or at some point was involved in the distillery ownership. So if we're taking a look at the numbers based on their website, between 1894 and 1950, it changed hands 3 different times. And in 2015, under that new ownership, the distillery went through some renovations. And then during that renovation project, they ended up honoring the original founders of the distillery, Ben Holladay and his brother David Holladay. So they ended up renaming the distillery the Holladay Distillery. After they ramped up production in 2022, the normal bourbon, the high rye bourbon, ended up hitting the market in 2022. And then the following year after that, 2023, the soft red wheat hit the market. And if you get onto their website, there is a distillery page that goes over all of the individual single batches that kind of give you the information from each of these bottles. I do not believe they are currently up to date because I went on there and looked for these 2 distilling dates and they're not on there. And I also want to point out that the soft red wheat mash bill of 721512 is posted on their website, but I can't find anything specific about the mash bill for this one. I'm assuming or guessing that it's going to be the same thing with the exception of the percentage of rye matching the percentage of the wheat. If you know anything different, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be very interested to hear if that is the case, and if so, why aren't they posting that on the website like they did with this one? So there you have it, a little bit of a brief history of the distillery. If you have anything else to add to that, just post some comments down below so everybody can kind of have a idea. And like always, I'm not an expert at this, so if anything that I said was misleading or I misspoke, just kindly just correct me in the comments. All right, so the cherry plum spicy note is still there. It's just dialed down, which I kind of expected it to be with the amount of water that I added. It still smells really good, and there is a huge fruit forward component to this. I think the vanilla also is now increased a little bit more, and the spice, even though adding water to bourbon sometimes adds a little bit more spice to it, I think the spice is a little bit more subdued as well. All right, let's go ahead and get it on the palate. There's the spice, there's the oak. Yeah, definitely spice and more spice. Cherry plum note way in the background, a little bit more tannin than I want on the side of the tongue, and it finishes off pretty oaky. I'm not sure I particularly care for what the water did to this. I would much prefer this by itself without water. All right, let's go ahead and get a rinse and then move on to the soft red wheat. All right, soft red wheat. You know, it's fluffy. It's like a pillow or a cloud. It doesn't have any harsh notes to it at all. It smells very soft. Get a little bit of a buttery note on this one. That apple and pear note is now more towards just a hard candy sweetness, a sugary hard candy sweetness. Very nondescript. Not sharp in any way. Definitely not as vibrant as glass number one. So let's go ahead and get it on the palate and see what the water did to this one. I think the water softened even more. I think the spice level is less, the sweetness is less, and the tannin and dryness is more. Again, I don't think the soft red wheat does well with the water, or at least the amount of water that I added. So going forward, I think these two would definitely be a bourbon and a wheated bourbon that I would drink neat by itself without anything. The more that the wheat is finishing up, it's becoming more and more dry. So that just furthers the point that I definitely would not add water to either one of these. Now, as far as the score goes, if you're new here, I rate everything out of 5 stars. Because of the price, the nondescript portion of the soft red wheat, I'm gonna rate this one first because I don't believe it is the better of the two. Based on how plain it is, without being bad. I'm not saying that this is a bad offering at all. I just don't think that it has enough of a wheated bourbon vibe that I typically like. And because of all the notes that are there with the red apple and the pear with a very, very soft amount of spice, I don't think there's enough here to balance it out. So this one, I'm going to end up putting this at 3.25 stars. It's good, but I'm not overly impressed with it. Now, on the other hand, the high rye bourbon, with it being balanced with the sweet and the spice, having a little bit of an oak influence, and how this morphed and changed with the first sip to the second sip with the spice and the sweetness flip-flopping, I really do like this one much more than this, but I definitely don't like this as much as I liked the Green River from last week. So this is going to end up getting just a basic average score of 3.5 stars. I think overall, the impression of both of these are good. They're just not as memorable as other wheated bourbons and bourbons that are in the high rye category. Have you had these? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below what you think of these. And I guess it's a good time to say, if you are liking this information and you're not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, turn that bell notification on because I go live with videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you're still here, I also want to just give you a little bit more information on my monthly giveaway. I do have a September giveaway happening at the moment. All of the rules to that giveaway are in the description below, but very briefly, these are US participants only. If you're interested in supporting the channel by donating a super thanks, there's a little heart with a $sign in it underneath the video. You can donate any increment of $5. Each increment of $5 will get you 1 entry into the giveaway. I did a Craig Elligy First Friday Flight Fight. That's going to be automatically included into the giveaway if you win. And then on top of that, you can choose 6 2-ounce samples of anything else that I reviewed in the month of September. You have to be 21 years of age or older to win. You have to be able to verify somehow, some way your age. And then if you are selected as a winner, I have my email address in the description below, along with my Instagram, Whiskey is a Journey. You can just DM me there with all of your information. All right, that's where I'm going to leave it, wherever you're at in your journey. I hope you're enjoying it. And until Wednesday for my Sip It or Skip It episodes, we'll talk to you next time. Cheers, everybody.